Okay, I had a really weird experience with Evangelion. I bought Evangelion when it first came out, the ADV release, back in the early 2000s, whatever it was. And so I watched the first 2 discs of Evangelion and was blown away. Loved what I saw. And then I read about the controversies around like ADV's release of that, because there were some issues around that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna hold off on this, see what people are talking about, maybe come back to it, whatever, and so forth. Time passed. Years passed, and then people were talking about like the ending of the series and how amazing it was. And I was like, okay, I have enough experience with Evangelion. I know where the plot's going. I'm not worried about being spoiled. I want to see what everyone's talking about. So I watched episodes 25 and 26 of Evangelion alone, and I was blown away again. I loved what they did with that ending in terms of the art of animation. What they were expressing through that was masterclass in how to use animation to get across emotion and tone and symbolism, all this kind of stuff. But I also recognize that like it doesn't feel like the show's changed much. These characters feel like kind of the same as they were. So 3 weeks ago, I finished watching Neon Genesis Evangelion. I went back and finally watched it all the way through. And I got to the ending and I was like, yeah, this makes sense. You know, the symbolism and the plot and all of that, I'll put it this way. At the end, I found the takes that they went frustrating for Evangelion in the sense that, you know, you have very little in the way of character development, for Shinji, for example. Very little character development. He finally kind of gets his moment to evolve, and then he disappears from the show for the rest of the show. You know, and then you have all the stuff with Asuka, and then Asuka does her thing, and you're like, that's not what I wanted to watch, you know, come on. And then they build up to this, what's going to happen at the end. They have all this big apocalyptic stuff. Oh my gosh, you're not going to see any of that. Right? It all happens off screen. But in terms of the show's themes, of psychology, of exploring this young kid who is very shy and needs to break out of his shell, they followed that plot through to the end. So I had lots of questions. Now, and again, it's weird because I already knew the answer to those questions because, you know, you cannot be an anime fan for long without learning about Evangelion. But the fundamental stream of that show kind of came to a thing. It's just the form of that ending was very frustrating, but it was at least answering those questions of where the character was going. Lane, I ended and I was like, I have no idea what I just watched.
Yeah. And I still feel that way 20 years later.
My most popular video is an anime titled Serial Experiments Lain. What did I just watch?
Yeah.
You know, and it kind of goes into some of the plot and stuff and so forth. So I went back and I rewatched Lane over and over again. To kind of get a sense of all that stuff, and I've now gotten to the point where I see all the different plot lines and kind of where they're going, some of the symbolism and the, you know, there are answers there. The other complexity is I actually went to Otakon 2001. Their theme that year was Lane, and so I went to a panel with the creators of that, and somebody raised their hand and said, "So I have this theory," you know, and so interestingly, she said. Early in the show, I think it's episode 1, Lane is sitting at her desk, and smoke starts coming out of her fingers.
Right.
And that is a common image that people who are dying talk about having. That when they hallucinate or whatever, have these images, they see smoke coming out of their fingers. Right. So she said, is the entire series basically Lane dying, and these are just images in her head? And the creator of the show said, that is one perfectly valid interpretation.
That's awesome.
We're all like, that's not the question. And then he went on and he said, when we made Lane, one of our fundamental decisions as a group is that we would come up with our own internal reasonings and plots as to what happened in Lane, but we would make it such that that was only one of many possible interpretations, and whatever the audience decided was perfectly valid. And we will not tell anyone what is our personal interpretation.
What is the actual resolution?
What is the actual resolution is up to you. In that fundamental sense. Which is, again, great and, you know?
Fantastic, right?
Yes.
I mean, no matter how you cut it or how you feel about it at the end,
Yeah.
still fantastic, right?
Yeah. And I have friends, and one of the things I love about Lain, a friend of mine actually just finished watching it. And I was like, so what do you think happened? And he gave his own theory, and I was like, that's really interesting. I feel completely opposite. I have a completely different theory for how all that worked. But he, you know, what he says kind of puts together. It's why one of the reasons I love the show is because you can actually do that. My own take, by the way, is that Lain is accurate and realistic to that world. What you see is actually happening. All those things are phasing into reality. And Lain is dealing with that because, okay, does anyone here care about Lain spoilers? Cool. So I believe that basically Lain was built as essentially a root user for the internet. She was a direct human connection to the internet. And then Dr. Airy went insane and modified the Protocol 7, the protocol for the internet, to merge the two. Because he believed that humanity needed to be merged. Note also that Lain is post-Evangelion. And so there's a little bit of sort of Evangelion reference, where I think they're kind of saying the whole idea of Evangelion is we almost merge together as one giant unit, right? Spoilers. But in Lain, they're like, this guy does that, that's bad. Like, we do not all want to live in the same headspace. That's really scary. And so he does that, and suddenly they have this individual who they want to be as the root user of the internet, but who is not fully formed yet. And so they put her in a family. They invent a family for her and plug her in, which is why she kind of shows up in that family. But the family doesn't quite know how to interact with her. And so there's this distance between her. But they need to isolate her from that problem because she needs to learn how to be a human first. And so she is dealing with all of these strange things, and they're all being attracted to her because one of the things Dr. Airy did is he stole the source code to Lain. He has a software copy of Lain that he releases on the internet, and that is the Lain of the Wired that's running around doing all the crazy stuff.
Okay.
And that's why there's this duplicate of Lain running around. And so what basically happens at the end is Lain realizes, I have this power. I can reset everything. Because the internet is now lit over to the real world, and I can rewrite people's memories, I can essentially rewrite the world. I can rewrite everyone's perceptions of what's actually happening. And so she starts doing that, like what happens with Alice. She kind of rewrites things and then realizes, dang, I do that and people suffer. That's bad. And the problem is there's no way for me to rewrite reality and still be in that reality. The creators of Lain said this really interesting thing. They said, we were surprised that Lain was popular outside of Japan. Because Lain's fundamental decision, and this is there in the show, this is not a spoiler, I mean, it's what happens at the end, but Lain decides to remove herself from reality. Because that is the most responsible thing for her to do. And because society would be better without Lain directly in it. In other words, Lain must sacrifice herself for the good of society.
So,
Yes.
when this came out, I remember, that's like an age right here. There was a lot of people jumping off buildings in Japan that were of the age that Lain was. So there was
Yeah.
a lot of like suicide going on. It was always like a lot of commentary about that.
Yep.
And I remember the very first thing that happens is a classmate dies, and then does she get a text? And they're-
Yes.
they're not gonna
She
text.
gets an email.
Right. She
Yep.
gets something, and she's like, "What?" So I mean, I don't know.
No, absolutely. And what's also interesting is that like that was also a common thing in like Japanese horror at the time, is the idea of suicides and what was going on and so forth. So they frame it as a horror story,
Right.
right? Where the dead are coming back, what's going on? And they're like, no, that's not our theme.
Right.
What's also brilliant about Lain, and okay, yes, it's a spoiler. I don't care. Lain sets itself up as being a very common sci-fi plotline about how, internet comes out, and the internet's great because we can all connect to each other. We could have all of these, things. And that is very much the message of that show. And then next to last episode, Lane tells that to Alice, and Alice says, no, you're wrong. Because the internet's great. The internet's useful, but it's what you have here. It's the human connection physically to individual people that you can get partway to on the internet. But we need those one-to-one things. And the entire TV show flips over. And suddenly the rest of the show is about, okay, that human connection motivates Lane for the rest of the show. And that is the most important thing going all through. And this is made by people who understood the internet and understood what was going on. They are not anti-internet, but they're like, futurists are all yay internet.
Right.
And this is 1998. This is pre-Twitter. This is pre-Facebook. This is pre-all that stuff. We didn't see how horrible the internet could be, but they're kind of predicting that very early on, which is really, really fascinating. Yeah, I could do all day about it.